Okay, so life can be hard work, can't it? If we're honest, life can be hard work. I mean, I think if we went around this room and asked everyone in this room, probably everyone is either going through a hard time or knows someone who's going through a hard time. I mean, it's part of life. It's part of life on this earth. You know, that might be a personal grief. It might be some other kind of loss. It might be suffering through illness. It might be financial or relational kind of difficulties. It might be to do with work. It might be to do with housing, friendships, all sorts of different things that cause sadness and sorrow into our lives. And also, as well as that, or in addition to that, there can be a kind of sadness and a sorrow that's not just an individual thing. We can feel it at a community level or at a national or international level. So I think probably in this room, most of us would feel a sense of sorrow and sadness about what is going on in Gaza and about what's going on in Ukraine, about what's going on in the Yemen and what's going on in various other places, maybe around the world, as well as what's going on in our own nation as well. We can very easily feel that kind of sense of sorrow and sadness about things in our own nation, things such as abortion, as racism, anti-Semitism, the kind of breakdown of marriage and the blurring of gender and so many other things that go on in our nation, in our world, that can cause kind of sadness and sorrow in our hearts as followers of Jesus. And because we live in the West, we are conditioned to want happy endings. All of our stories have happy endings. That's the way we are in the West. You may not have realized it, but that's the way it is. It's not the same around the rest of the world, but here we love to finish all stories with happy endings, and so we are conditioned to look for happy answers in everything. We basically want it to say, and they all lived happily ever after. That's what we want everything to end with, because we are here. We find sadness and sorrow really awkward, don't we? We don't know what to do when someone's crying. I mean, we've all been in that awkward place and someone's crying and you're like, I don't know, do I touch them? That's a bit weird. We don't quite know what to do. And ideally, we want to remove ourselves from that situation or stop them crying as quickly as possible. And I see it increasingly at funerals that grief is being squeezed out. We're doing everything we can to not show grief. So funerals are celebrations now. And in church, we tend to prefer celebratory, I was going to say celebrity, but that's wrong, isn't it? Celebratory and triumphant songs and sermons. That's what we prefer. They're easier. They're much less awkward. And what I've seen as a pastor all too often is that when people are going through pain, when people are in kind of sorrow and sadness and that kind of situation, as Christians, they'll often think that they shouldn't feel like this. That somehow they shouldn't be feeling like we're Christians. We're triumphant, victorious. We shouldn't be feeling like this. And then other well-meaning Christians will come alongside and they will say words to the effect of, you shouldn't be feeling like this. They may not say it quite in those terms, but that's essentially what they're saying. Just have some faith and you'll be all right. Then we sort of throw out a load of just random Bible verses to try and make each other feel better so that we can stop crying, stop feeling awkward, and move on towards our happy ending. So I want to speak today about something that we don't speak about very much in church, but I think it's really important, and it's this: lament. Lament. Lamenting. A lament is a prayer that stands in the gap between the pain that we experience in this life and the promise of God that we look forward to. It's the prayer that stands in the gap between the pain of this life and the promise that we look forward. The lament is a prayer that helps us to process pain. It walks through sorrow. It finds a way to step around the trite solutions that people would offer to us and the unhelpful comments, and it will bring us to God, because to lament is wholly biblical. It's completely biblical. It's a gift from God. At least, I don't know if you knew this, but at least a third of the Psalms are laments. Probably way more than a third, depends exactly how you define it, but at least a third of them are. That's the single largest category of the Psalms. We often think that the Psalms are all about praise and worship, and there is a lot of praise and worship, but actually over a third of them are laments. And so what I want to do today, just for our time that we've got together, is define and describe what a lament is. We're going to see that it involves 4 key elements, and we'll have a look at that. And we're going to illustrate it from various different Psalms as we go through. And then next week, we're going to delve into the book of Lamentations. Lamentations, lament. It is a lament. So we're going to delve into that and have a little look and walk through that book. Now, ideally, these 2 sermons sort of hang together. So ideally, you're here for both of them, or at least have watched or hear both of them. So if you're not here next week, it'd be good to watch the Lamentations one. It would also be great to read the book of Lamentations this week before next Sunday, because we can't read the whole book in one go. It's got 5 chapters, so it's quite doable. So if you get a chance to read it this week, that would be great. Those of you who signed up to the sort of Bible reading together thing, we went through Luke's Gospel, and then we did Hebrews. That's finished. Might do Lamentations just Monday to Friday this week. Bit of lamenting Monday to Friday. You can have the weekend off from it. So we'll do that. So starting tomorrow, chapter 1 of Lamentations, and we'll go through until Friday, chapter 5, if you are on that and are interested. If you're not on that and would like to be on that little group, which is just read the same chapter together and then people comment about it, let me know and I can add you to it. I'm going to draw quite a lot of what I'm saying from a book. This book, it's called Dark Cloud, Deep Mercy by Mark Vrogop. That may not be how you say his surname, but Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. So if you want a more developed version of what I'm saying, get that book, read it. It's a great book. So most of us probably don't really know what a lament is other than kind of a sad prayer. Or maybe we think it involves some kind of wailing or groaning or something like that. That's kind of what we think a lament is. We find it quite hard to identify it in 21st century Britain, but that's not really what it means. A lament is a prayer that's born out of the strong emotions we feel when we go through times of individual or community suffering. It's a prayer that leads us to trust in God. That's what it's about. The guy who wrote the book said this: lament is a prayer that leads to trust. That's what makes it distinctively Christian, rather than just sadness or negativity. It leads us to trust. And so, to lament is not the opposite of having faith. It's not the opposite of faith. The opposite of faith is doubt. It is, in fact, a prayer of faith because it leads us towards God. It's just not the opposite of faith. And it's not the opposite of praise and worship. It's part of praise and worship. Sometimes we think praise and worship is happy, lamenting is sad. So therefore those things are the opposite to each other. They're not. They're 2 sides of the same coin. Actually, our praise and worship is unbalanced without lament. We need to lament as part of our praise and worship. So these are the 4 elements we're just going to look at today of lament. The first thing is it involves a turning to God. The second thing is a complaint to God. The third thing is a request to God. And the fourth thing is a decision to trust in God. That's kind of where we're going to head. Not going to take very long, but we're just going to whip through these. And then we are going to come back and just worship a little bit at the end as well. So let's just think about these together. Firstly, a turning to God. And this is really important. That lament starts with a turning towards God. Because that's what makes lamenting Christian, as I said, rather than just sadness or negativity that anyone can do. Lament starts by turning towards God. Have a look at some of these Psalms, how all these Psalms open. Psalm 3, verse 1, Lord, how many are my foes? Psalm 4, verse 1, answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. Psalm 5, verse 1, listen to my words, Lord, consider my lament. Psalm 6, verse 1, Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger. Psalm 7, verse 1, Lord, my God, I take refuge in you. Psalm 10, verse 1, why, Lord, do you stand far off? Psalm 12, verse 1, help, Lord, for no one is faithful anymore. Psalm 13, verse 1, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? And they just keep going all the way through. The Psalms are like that. Psalm 77, verse 1, I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out untiring hands, and I would not be comforted. Psalm after psalm starts with the author turning towards God. They all start with Lord. There's somewhere in that first verse is like an appeal directly to God. You might still be full of anger and bitterness and sadness, and you might still be having a little bit of a chunter beneath your breath, but a lament starts by turning towards God. And in that sense, a prayer of lament is a huge act of faith because it involves you turning towards God. When life is tough and you turn towards God, that is faith in action. That's what faith is about. You know what? If you've ever gone through a tough time, a really hard time, and you have asked the question, where are you, God? Why is this happening to me, God? Why can't I feel your presence at the moment, Lord? Then I want to say that you're a person of faith. You might have felt in that moment like a person of doubt because you're asking a question. But the fact that you asked the question to God is a demonstration that you're a person of faith because you have come to the one person who can do something about it. You've come to God. So you are a person of faith. You might be sad, you might be sorrowful, you might feel very negative, but because you come to God, you're a person of faith. So this first stage of lamenting involves us turning towards him, turning towards God. However difficult that might be, however much doubt you might have, you direct those feelings towards him. You start with him. Second thing you do, though, is this. You complain to God. This is the second part of lamenting, is to complain to God. It might come as a shock to you, but the Bible is full of people complaining. There's loads of complainers. In that sense, they may well have been British. I don't know. They were probably queuing at the time as they were complaining about everything. But they don't just complain to themselves. They don't just complain to other people. But the authors, the writers of the Psalms, mainly David, complain to God. They complain to God. Those complaints might come out of sorrow. They might come out of fear, frustration, confusion, sleepless nights, all sorts of other ways that the complaints come, but they come to God. And the fascinating thing is that these complaints are not portrayed in the Bible as wrong. Do you know what? Actually, they're set to music so the people could sing them together. I mean, could there be anything more British than setting a complaint to music and singing it together? That's what they did. These were for singing. Now, as humans, as human beings, sadness, suffering, sorrow, they all have the potential to produce very negative emotions in our lives. They all have the capacity to produce anger, bitterness, denial. And those are the destinations that we can end up in when we're sad or we're suffering and we don't bring it to God. But biblical lamenting gives us a way, an alternative, to bring our complaints to God, and then, as we'll see as we go on, to find some hope. So have a look at some of these other Psalms where we see some of the complaints coming to God. Psalm 10, verse 2 to 5. This is the psalmist complaining. In his arrogance, the wicked man hunts down the weak who are caught in the schemes he devises. He boasts about the cravings of his heart. He blesses the greedy and reviles the Lord. In his pride, the wicked man does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there's no room for God. His ways are always prosperous. Your laws are rejected by him. He sneers at all his enemies. Listen to that complaint. The psalmist is saying, why do bad people prosper? What's going on, Lord? There's a bit of complaining, a bit of moaning. Psalm 12, verse 2. Everyone lies to their neighbor. They flatter with their lips, but harbor deception in their hearts. It's a good old complaint. Everyone's lying, bunch of liars, lying toe rags. Psalm 22, verse 2. My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest. It's a complaint. He's having a good old moan. Psalm 28, verse 3. Do not drag me away with the wicked, with those who do evil, who speak cordially with their neighbors, but harbor malice in their hearts. You ever had that complaint? Yeah, they're all nicey to your face, aren't they? But inside, you know what they're really thinking. And there are loads more like these. And through the Psalms, we see the writers, the authors, the speaker expressing their complaints to God in real, honest, open ways, in specific ways. You know what? Jesus himself does this. Because on the cross, he quotes Psalm 22, verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus brings his complaint to God, to his Father. It's a specific complaint based on how David felt when he wrote that psalm 1,500 years before Jesus was on the cross. And there are loads more like that. And you know what, church? I believe we can do the same. I believe we can come with our sadness, and our sorrow, and we can bring it to God as a very specific, honest, open complaint. We can come to him and just say, this is happening, God. Why is this happening? This situation's going on. We can bring these things to him and complain. And the Psalms show us that it's biblical to do that, to bring it to God. Now, there are some boundaries to it. And we've got to bear this in mind. There are some boundaries. So we've got to kind of be ready, and we've got to familiarize ourselves with the Psalms, because they will give us some language and they'll give us some boundaries whereby our complaints do not become negative. They do not overstep a line. So when you read through the Psalms, you'll see that they do stop short of falling in, descending, if you like, into complete negativity and into very dark places. They give some language for that. You see, David, the main writer of the Psalms, he always remains humble. He never oversteps a line into arrogance. He never believes he knows better than God. He remains humble in his complaining. Something else interesting is that none of the words are beeped out. None of the words are beeped out. It's becoming increasingly common for Christians to swear, isn't it? It's sort of trendy nowadays. I don't see that in the Psalms. And I don't think we should be doing it. I don't think it's right for us to use vulgar or crude language. There's a load of biblical verses about that, but I just think we need to be careful not to use the language of the world, but to use the language of the Bible when we complain. Let's be careful. One more thing to say just about complaining. Don't get stuck complaining. So stage 1 is to turn to God. Stage 2 is to complain to God. But stage 2 is not the destination. Stage 4 is the destination. So we mustn't just get stuck and stay in stage 2. And it's really easy, because stage 2, where we complain, feels good, doesn't it? I mean, like if we went around this room and just said, okay, who loves a good moan? I mean, I think it'd be probably 100% hands up. And the ones of you who didn't put your hand up, I'd probably say you're lying. Like we love a good moan, we love a complain, and it makes us feel better somehow. But the danger is that we get stuck there, just complaining and complaining and complaining and complaining. And maybe you know some people like that. Maybe you are a person like that. But maybe you know some people like that. And they've become very negative. And sometimes you have to step away from those people, because you just think, actually, you're poisoning. You're a poisonous person, because you're just so negative. We mustn't get stuck complaining. It's stage 2 out of 4 stages, and that is so important. So let's jump forward now to stage 3, which is that stage 3 is to bring our requests to God. There's 2 questions kind of at work when we are lamenting. The first question is asking who God is. Who are you, God? And the second question kind of behind it is, why is this happening to me? They're the kind of 2 things that are at play, is who are you, God, and why is this happening to me? That's basically at the root of our complaints when we come to God. And if we think about who God is like the sun, that question is like the sun, and the why is this happening to me, God, is like the moon. Well, during stages 1 and 2 of lamenting, what you find is that the moon, as enough, the why is this happening to me, God question, eclipses the sun, which is the who are you, God question. Does that make sense? The why is this happening is big, right? And it moves in front in stages 1 and 2. That's when we're in the midst of this terrible situation. It's like a kind of a solar eclipse going on, and it either fully or partially or temporarily just blots out our view of who God is. We can't see who he is because we're so consumed by the why is this happening to me. But as we move on to stage 3, as we move on to this next stage, what we start to see is actually the moon, the why is this happening to me, starts to move away. And the who are you, God, starts to shine through. As we move past complaint into request, suddenly this kind of warmth of his presence starts to flood into our lives again. The day of complaining starts to pass as we start to move towards the day of request. Have a look at some of the requests there are in the Psalms. Look, this is the most common request in the Psalms. Arise, Lord. Here's one, Psalm 3, verse 7. Arise, Lord. Deliver me, my God. You see it in loads of places. Psalm 7, Psalm 9, Psalm 10, Psalm 17, Psalm 74, Psalm 94. It's everywhere. If you wanted to summarize what this phrase is, arise, Lord, it's just do something, Lord. It's like, I don't even know what to pray, but just arise, God. Please do something. Anything will be better than the situation I find myself in. Here's another request to God. Help us, Lord. Psalm 60, verse 11. Give us aid. Help us against the enemy. For human help is worthless. There's the request coming to God. Here's another request. Remember your mercy. You come to God and just say, remember that you're merciful. Remember your kindness, God. Psalm 25, verse 6. Remember, Lord, your great mercy and love, for they are from of old. Here's a great request. Show him who's boss, Lord. Show him who's boss. Psalm 83:18. Let them know that you, whose name is the Lord, that you alone are the most high over all the earth. I love that request. You know when people are just really annoying you? What a great prayer to pray. Lord, show him who's boss. It's always him, thankfully. It's not you. It's not me. It's always him. What a great request to come to God with. Here's another one. Don't remember my sin, Lord. We come to him, Psalm 51, look here it is. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Another verse, same idea, Psalm 79. Do not hold against us the sins of past generations. May your mercy come quickly to meet us, for we are in desperate need. Don't remember my sin, Lord. It's a prayer he always answers. Amazing prayer. Where are we? Restore us. Psalm 80, verse 3. Restore us, O God. Make your face shine on us, that we may be saved. Restore us, God. Here's another request. Don't be silent. You ever felt like God's just silent? He's not saying anything? Well, turn that into a request. Don't be silent, God. Psalm 28, verse 1. To you, Lord, I call. You are my rock. Do not turn a deaf ear to me. For if you remain silent, I'll be like those who go down to the pit. Hear my cry for mercy as I call to you for help, as I lift up my hands toward your most holy place. A couple more requests. Teach me your ways. Psalm 143. Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. May your good spirit lead me on level ground. And here's a final one, a great one. Vindicate me. Vindicate me. You've been treated badly. You've been treated in a way you didn't deserve. You've been falsely accused. And so the psalmist says, Psalm 35, awake and rise to my defense. Contend for me, my Lord and God. Vindicate me in your righteousness, Lord my God. Do not let them gloat over me. We might struggle with that language, just to think, asking God to vindicate me. I feel like I should ask him to vindicate himself. But actually the Psalms give us this language. We can come before God and just say, I have been falsely accused, God. Vindicate me. Will you do that, Lord? These are the kind of requests that we can bring to God, these kind of bold, strong requests of which there is language throughout the Psalms for us to use, asking him for action, for intervention. I have loved looking at these this week. I've had the privilege of being able to spend longer than the 5 minutes I'm lobbing them at you, to just dwell on them and to just look a little bit at some of these Psalms and just have a little look through them. The guy that wrote the book said, boldly asking God for help based on who he is and what he's promised eclipses the complaints. The why questions and the who questions coexist, but not equally. That's important. The why questions are still there. They've just changed positions with the who questions. Who God is becomes the more prominent reality while not removing the lingering questions. Some of the prayers are specific. Some are general. Some just say, arise, God. Some ask him to do something in particular. But I want to say, if you've been stuck complaining to God for a while about something, well, here's the next stage for you. Bring your specific and your general requests to God. Use these Psalms to bring them to him. You know what? There are 150 Psalms. If you pray one a day, you're sorted until the 17th of July. If you pray one a week, because there's a lot in them, that's nearly 3 years you're sorted for. Like, come back to me in 2027, we'll talk again. We'll see how you've got on. You keep tithing between now and then, but just, come back. Bring your requests to God. That's stage 3. Let's go to our last stage, stage 4. A decision to trust in God. And this is where it all heads. This is kind of the pinnacle of what we're talking about this morning. So sorrow and sadness has hit your life. Suffering and loss is going on individually, community, nationally, internationally, whatever it might be. So we turn to God. We complain to God. We move beyond the complaints and specifically request God, ask him to intervene and to do things. And then we choose to trust in him. We choose to trust in him. Ooh. Let me read slightly longer, just 6 verses from a psalm. Psalm 13. The psalmist says, "How long, Lord?" There he is. He turns to God. "Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" He's complaining. "How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me?" He's still complaining. "Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes or I'll sleep in death." Now he's requesting. He says, "Look on me. And my enemy will say, I've overcome him. My foes will rejoice when I fall." Still part of the request. "But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me." The key verse in the middle of this is verse 5. "But I trust in your unfailing love." But I trust. It pivots on that. Sometimes in the Psalms it's a but, sometimes it's a yet, sometimes it's like the next verse, verse 6, "I will sing the Lord's praise, for he's been good to me." It's a decision. It's a choice. It's not a feeling. If you've got the feeling as well, bonus. Brucey bonus, you feel it as well. But even if you don't feel it, it's a decision that we make where we say, "But I will praise you. But I will trust in you. Yet I will sing your praises. I will do this. I will sing your praises because you've been good to me, God." You've complained. You've asked him to intervene. And now you say, "I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you anyway. I might feel it. I might not feel like it. Might be in the mood for it. Might not be in the mood for it. But I'm going to do it anyway." And this is difficult, but essential. We have to do it. Because if we just get stuck in the complaining, we'll become really negative. We'll end up in some really dark places. And if we just request and make it all about him answering, then we'll get stuck there. But actually, we need to make a choice and say, "I'm going to worship you. I'm going to praise you. I'm going to trust you anyway." If you get stuck complaining, then it's a very small step from complaining to God to complaining about God. And then it's a really small step to start complaining about church, complaining about each other. It's really small steps once we get stuck in that place. Life sucks sometimes. Really hard. It's really tough. If not for you, then for other people that you know around you. And if you don't know of anyone, I can tell you of people in this church who are going through some incredibly difficult times at the moment, who are in incredible grief, other situations going on in their lives. But we can't get stuck complaining. We can't get stuck requesting. We must choose to trust. Do you know the Christians who inspire me the most are not the ones who talk the talk and do the flashy stuff? Not those ones. The Christians who inspire me the most are the ones who've made the decision to trust God despite really hard times. Graham Stevens, inspirational man. He's not here this morning. I can say it. He's got this cold that's going around. He's got the lurgy. He's been through such incredible pain for such a long time. And yet he says, I'll choose to trust. I'm going to worship. And there's other people And I don't say too many names because somebody will feel they're left out. I'm trusting God. Why didn't you say my name? And then you start complaining. Oh, I feel like I took us to a really nice moment there and then I spoilt it, didn't I? I always do that. God wants us to move towards trust. That's the point of lamenting. That's what it's all about. That's why we're given this gift of lamenting. Not feeling sad for the sake of it, not complaining for the sake of it, but coming to him with our complaints, with our requests, so that we might trust in him, so that we might worship him, so that we might get to that point. And maybe today, some of you here, you need to make that decision. Maybe you just need to make a decision. Life really sucks, but I am going to praise God anyway. I am going to just worship him. I am going to trust him. I am finding it hard to open my mouth in worship, but I'm going to trust him anyway in my heart. Maybe that is you today. Maybe today you need to echo the words of Job in the Old Testament, who had everything taken away from him. And what does he say? The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Maybe you need to do that today. So we're going to come, and just in our few moments together, we're going to worship God. And I've asked Grace to lead a song that actually it echoes the words of Job. You're probably guessing where we're going. It's that song, Blessed Be Your Name. And we're going to sing this, and maybe today this needs to be a decision you make where you are, that in the midst of everything, I'm going to just sing this. Maybe today stuff's going great for you. Perhaps you're not in a sad and sorrowful time. Well, learn this in the good times, because it's hard work to learn it in the hard times. Take it on today. Make a mental note. Make a physical note. Jot it down. Because, sorry to say, hard times will come in all of our lives, because they just do. And we need to be ready to respond. So if you'd like to stand, let's stand. If you prefer to sit, that's fine. But let's come and just worship God as we sing this.